When Boeing released their newest iteration 737 with the MAX moniker attached to it, it was supposed to convey the idea that this version of the jet would deliver max efficiency, max reliability, and max passenger appeal. But ever since two of these brand new jets went down in two tragic accidents, the plane has caused nothing but max problems. It's become painfully clear that the general public has lost faith in Boeing. And at this point, the only way forward for this aircraft family starts with a rebrand. Why is that? And what would that rebrand look like? Let me explain. Rebranding a commercial jet is kind of unprecedented. The closest thing that I can think of to a true rebrand is how McDonnell Douglas handled their troubled DC-10. This tri-jet was ubiquitous in the late 20th century. However, systemic technical issues, including engine failures and faulty cargo doors, haunted the jet and led to some high-profile crashes. The jet never quite recovered in the minds of the flying public, and prior to the MAX, many people regarded the plane as the world's most dangerous passenger jet, even though this technically wasn't true. To combat this negative perception, McDonnell Douglas replaced the DC-10 with the MD-11. Now, the MD-11 was, in fact, a slightly different plane than the DC-10. Despite drawing heavily on the DC-10's design, the MD-11 had greater range and payload capabilities, in addition to improved aerodynamics and avionics. Nevertheless, it was more of a second-generation DC-10 with a name change than a true clean-sheet jet. The MAX differs because its rebrand would be in name only. Unlike the MD-11, Boeing engineers are unlikely to change much of the jet at all. Sure, there will be some fixes, including the addition of redundant angle of attack sensors, addressing wiring issues, and upgrading the software. But that's about it. Even though the plane itself isn't changing much, Boeing might be forced to change its name because of the way our brains process first impressions. Now, don't go anywhere, I promise I will make this quick, but we need to cover a key psychological principle. The primacy and recency effects tell us that when we're learning something new, we're most likely to remember the first bits of information we process and the most recent. For instance, if you're trying to memorize a long shopping list, you're most likely to remember the first and last few items when asked to recall the list later on. These two tragic crashes were the first time that much of the flying public had learned anything about these jets. It really doesn't matter what fixes Boeing implements to make the plane safer. Since we're hardwired to recall the first things that we learned about the jets, most people will always think of them as unsafe. This is the crux of the argument as to why Boeing ought to give the jets a new name. They've actually conveniently positioned themselves to do just that, thanks in large part to previous product launches. Boeing currently builds the 787 Dreamliner and CST-100 Starliner, and a rebranded 737 could draw inspiration from these programs. Of course, Boeing will keep the 737 part of the name alive, since they've been using it for the past 60 or so years to describe this aircraft family. However, they could ditch the term MAX in favor of something like Comfort Liner or Tech Liner, something reassuring that mimics the naming conventions of the aforementioned programs. Now, you and I, people who are a little bit more invested in commercial aviation than your average Joe, will know that these planes are practically unchanged. But most people won't, and that is probably enough for Boeing to get people back on these jets. Before you head down to the comments section and yell at me telling me that this is just a shady marketing tactic, I want to be clear that I am not recommending this be the only step Boeing takes to address safety concerns. And to be completely honest, the fact that this rebrand might be seen as a dubious attempt to get unwitting passengers to fly the jet could ultimately force Boeing to stick with the MAX nickname. You guys know that I am a big fan of Boeing commercial airplanes, and I would like nothing more than to see this plane return and safely fly passengers for years to come. It has so much potential to help reduce the industry's carbon footprint and reduce ticket prices so that even more people can afford to travel. But there's no denying that Boeing has a lot of work to do, and only time will tell what's next for the beleaguered jet. If Boeing does rebrand the jet, what do you guys think it should be called? Let me know about it down in the comment section below, and I know this might be asking a lot from a YouTube comment section, but please, let's be civil. And as always, if you learned something new today, leave a like and subscribe to keep learning. And until I see you again, don't forget to look up.